Well, we lost internet. Sorry, guys. But we're back, as I say. But let's get through this because I can just ramble, obviously. But and there's so much to go over. But I want to get through the key clips that I said that I was going to get through. So I always do this, and get sidetracked. But here.
Question.
So this was an interesting clip. I'm gonna go through them super quick, so probably like I don't even know 5 minutes or so. But this clip, they're discussing why are so many people do they have an aversion to the idea that space time is emergent and not fundamental if consciousness is the primary structure. So this is the question.
Okay. When I watch your interviews with people who most of the time aren't physicists, they seem to be resistant on that space-time is emergent, like Michael Shermer. And he was saying, well, you probably talk to the minority of physicists that think that space-time is emergent. That's not, in fact, true. Most physicists, as far as I know, actually believe that space-time is emergent. Nima is one of them, Lee Smolin. So why do you think that there's this aversion to monist, that is monoism, theories predicated on the primacy of consciousness rather than the primacy being material? Why is it that that's the sticking point?
Right. Well, and even among physicists who recognize that space-time isn't fundamental, you won't find very many of them arguing that therefore consciousness is a good candidate for what is fundamental. I've been to an FQXI meeting of physicists where they were looking at the role of the observer in physics at Banff a few years ago. And even in that context where they were looking at the role of the observer in physics, I didn't see any of the physicists there interested in taking consciousness as fundamental. And I think the attitude is, why take such a huge leap? I mean, letting go of space-time is one thing, but jumping into consciousness, I mean, that for I think most physicists would say that's a much bigger leap than we need to take. Let's try to find just some deeper structure beyond space-time. And for example, this is, I think, the brilliant work that Nima Arkhani Hamed is doing, where he's saying, look, we can look at these so-called positive geometries behind space-time, the amplitude-hedron, associahedron, and other things that he's finding, positive Grassmannians, the bigger structure that includes many of these.
But periodicity. I'm not saying that they would classify that as that, but I'm going to. The Calabi-Yau manifold, all of these structures that are geometric structures that nobody knows what they really are in a material sense.
And he doesn't know what that realm is about, which is fine, but he's finding the mathematical structure. So he's finding that there are these symmetries, like in the amplitude-hedron, that can't be captured in space-time. They also have found that the mathematical description of the scattering amplitudes, the computations of the scattering amplitudes, become much simpler when you let go of space-time. If you use Feynman diagrams and have virtual particles in space-time, then you could have hundreds or thousands of pages. But in this deeper space that he's finding, this pure math, it collapses to a few terms that you can compute by hand. And so I think that the physicists are saying, let's not jump further than we have to. If we have to let go of space-time, let's just find let's let the mathematics guide us first. And we can try things like, well, let's just try like quantum bits and quantum gates. Seth Lloyd, I think, at MIT, took an approach.
Quantum bits and quantum what?
Quantum bits and quantum gates.
So basically, the reason why I think they don't want to jump to consciousness is because, one, their education about what quantum mechanics is has been so warped that it makes no sense. That's why they have that phrase of, if you think that you understand quantum mechanics, then you don't understand quantum mechanics. That's not, I don't like that statement. I disagree with it. I think you can understand quantum mechanics. If you understand quantum mechanics, then you do understand quantum mechanics. If you think that you don't understand quantum mechanics, then it's because you don't. And if like that, if you use that phrase, then it means that you just don't understand. And it's because you're not contextualizing it around interacting conscious agents, sentient beings. And because that's the true context of quantum mechanics, of the standard model. That is where all those particles come from. They come from the interpretation of information and cognition and interaction and observation and, of one sentient being of another, of one sentient singularity of another, within another, interacting with another. Like that's what leads to it. That is the context. But they don't want to say that, and the reason why, and it's funny because Kurt used the word monist specifically, meaning like there is, I'm guessing this is what he means, is that there is a truly unified structure that you can put everything in, and that would be consciousness. The reason why they don't like this is because I think, and I'm not trying to judge or psychologize or anything like that, but I think that there is this odd, and I think it's an actual phenomenon where if you are not ready for the idea that to take seriously the idea of God, your subconscious knows it sometimes before your conscious awareness knows it. Your subconscious knows it. And it will cause you to be averse to or hostile to anything that starts moving in that direction. Like everything is one and everything is consciousness. If that's true, then existence is one consciousness, and that everything that we perceive that has, emerged within existence, from the universe and everything in it, was created by one consciousness. That is God, by definition. And I think that there is an aversion to this idea that is natural and it's not just that they're scheming to get out of it. I don't even think that they realize that they're doing it all the time. It's very weird. There are lots of phenomenon that in the world that are very heavy emotionally, and when something is heavy emotionally, remember, you're a sentient singularity. You cannot actually process that information totally. It's like, why is everybody so like apathetic to the revelations revolving UFOs? Like, why is this not the biggest news in the world? There are lots of people that are stoked on it, but there are people that are physicists. I think it was Lee Smolin, I think, the guy who he mentioned, who is, I think he created loop quantum gravity. He was discussing physics with Eric Weinstein on a live stream, and Eric Weinstein was, these UFOs, and he's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, you haven't heard that the Pentagon has like admitted that there's like craft from another civilization flying around? And he was like, "I've never heard of this." He's the creator of loop quantum gravity. He's never heard of this. This was like a solid year into this being known. And it's because some things that, in order to like really take a re-examination of your basic worldviews, and And that means overcoming your most fundamentally constructed emotions around certain things, including the universe. And I went through this. What's his name? Oh my gosh. Brian Keating. He said when he was discussing, I'm pretty sure he was discussing me. He was like, I have this friend who has this, cosmic macrame model, and he was like, I just don't understand why it has to be something like that. Why does it have to be anything more than it is? And I was watching this, and it was like there was an emotional aspect to what he was saying. It was why creating the model that I was, but the reality was is that I used to have the same exact perspective as him, and I used to look at people who, believed in God, and I was like, why does it have to be God? Isn't the world beautiful enough? Like, look at the universe. Look at nebulas and stars and supernovas and Mars and, the moon and asteroids and, I don't know, everything else that is involved in space and what we normally think of as the cosmos. And I was like, isn't that grandiose enough? That's what I used to think. It's an emotional argument, though, and it is because you are attached to something that you view as beautiful, and it is beautiful. I will say objectively, you watch Stephen Hawking's Into the Universe, and you're like, whoa, that's just amazing. If you're not past that point, but the thing is that when you pass that point, it's not that it's not those things. It still is those things. They're less meaningful to you, but they are still there. But you discover more beauty and meaning behind it all for the first time, and it's so much. I mean, the universe is so much more beautiful than mainstream physics realizes. Like, so much more beautiful. It could not be more beautiful, and but they are attached to what they know because they think that is so beautiful, and they don't want to let go of it. But you don't have to let go of it. You just build on it. And but I get it. I've been there. But that's what it is, I think. That's why most physicists are so averse to consciousness being the fundamental. They either view it as this is the pathway to woo, which we don't take woo people seriously. I'm not saying I don't, I'm saying they don't. And I say sometimes woo is true, but it's also the path. Woo is the path to God, like as we know God as a sentient, self-aware being that's also aware of you and has a plan. It's not just this higher power somewhere else that, doesn't really pay any attention to us. That's not true. That doesn't mean it's sometimes not like that. I'm just saying can pay attention to us and does care what happens. Where would African, Australian, and Native American religions fit in? The world is filled with an overwhelming amount of information, plus a lot of interesting, creative people. Detest the news. Yeah, I detest the news. The news doesn't exist. True news travels in niches. I don't need to watch CNN to know what's going on in the reptile world. I'm just in the reptile world. And I don't need to watch CNN to know what's going on in the firearms world or the martial arts world or the physics world. Like, I don't watch CNN to know what's going on in physics. I just am tapped into all these conversations because I'm in it. So it's all the information I'm getting is contextualized because I'm getting it firsthand versus just having it be filtered and decided on for me what's important and then fed to me, spoon-fed to me by, a corporation with perverse interests. The news doesn't exist. It's not that there's fake news and true news. There is no objective structure called the news. The only thing would be like the government that is telling you policy changes and personnel changes, and that's it. There's really nothing else. Even natural disasters and things like that, you don't have to know. If a bomb went off on the other side of the country, you don't have to know. You don't have to know. You'll find out if somebody that you care about was there. But you don't have to know. Why do you have to know? Think about how much more time. I'm not saying you shouldn't care. Of course, it emotionally impacts us. That's why we watch. But if it's logically, if it's not going to impact you directly, you should probably let it get to you organically. And if it gets to you organically, then you should really invest your emotions into it. But if it doesn't, then don't. You're taking away from even the people that, in investing your emotions from afar, you are also crowding the space and drowning out the voices of the people who were organically involved, who should be the people who are most heard, and who should be communicating with other people who were organically involved, not people on the other side of the country who are not involved, but still think their opinion is just as valid. It's really toxic. The whole idea that the news exists is toxic. It doesn't matter where you get it. Fox, CNN, Breitbart, MSNBC, it doesn't matter. It is the idea of an objective news source, general news source, that is, it is a lie. That doesn't actually exist. Because information is only information when it is in context. And if it's not in direct context to you organically, you either are going to get it out of context, in which case you're going to misinterpret it, or you are going to be purposely going to be put into a specific context for the sake of ulterior motives, and then it is going to misinform you. So I think Denzel Washington said this once, and it's such a brilliant quote. He said, if you don't watch the news, then you're not informed, and if you do watch the news, then you're misinformed. Which one's worse? That's my question. Better to be not informed than misinformed. As far as the African, Australian, Native American religions fit into this, I don't like the word religion, because when you start dissecting what all of these believe, they basically believe almost the same thing, but there are specific animating differences between specific ones, and those animating differences are what dictates where they go in the model. So the reason why those three are the ones that those six are the ones that I chose, the three Eastern and three Western, is because they are animating of the world. Like in a very serious way, almost. It's and especially the Abrahamic traditions. Like, it's almost like the other three, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Sikhism, are reacting to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But they are not actually animating in and of themselves. They're the neutron. They're the neutrons. They're the down quarks. They're the feminine, the reactive, but not the active is the Western Abrahamic traditions. I like the word theological traditions. And the Abrahamic traditions, which are primarily three, but there's others, you can get into like very detailed. You can go to Mormonism, you can go to, I don't know, like Catholicism and Protestantism, or you could go even more than that, and you can get into like the Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff like that. I mean, and I'm sure that those will align with more and more detailed models. They have to. It's just it is a constraint of reality. But when you look at the basics, you're going to get a triality that's actually a binary triality, which means you're going to get 2 degrees of freedom plus reflecting across an intrinsic constraint. So when you see the periodicity of force, or the generationality of force, you'll see Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But then you'll also see that Judaism and Islam are basically the exact same, but they are reflections of each other. And they are reflecting across an intrinsic constraint, which is Christianity. So basically, Christianity is the present, Islam is like the future, and Judaism is the past, essentially. Something like that. It's like the past and the future reflect across the present. You'll see that again and again and again. It's like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. Buddhism, I mean, I think I need to look more into it. I'm not very familiar with the Eastern religions or theological traditions, but those are the ones that I think are the ones. Buddhism, I think Hinduism is the oldest, then Buddhism, then Sikhism is the newest. But Sikhism is very much about like actions. Like Sikhs carry a knife with them called a kirpan. It's an awesome theological tradition. I love Sikhism. It is amazing. And they carry all the various, they're like the kings of EDC, like everyday carry. They carry a little comb, they carry their knife. These are like religious artifacts for them. I am the same way. I identify with the Sikhs. Like I carry a little comb with me. I carry my knife. Like this is, it's not a coincidence that these items are also being manifested as theological or spiritually necessary items in a specific context of a theological tradition, because they are objectively required. One of them is a comb. It's for, manipulating yourself, cleaning yourself up. But then you have a knife, which is for, self-defense, and that's what it represents in Sikhism. So the modern equivalent would be like concealed carry, and in more so than like carrying a little Leatherman. This is not a weapon. This is like a tool. But you could use a kirpan as a tool, but it represents self-defense, and that's the purpose of it. Essentially, it's a dagger that's carried by Sikhs, and it is the modern equivalent is a concealed carry firearm, which that is something that is part of my life when legally able. I live in a place that doesn't really allow it. But I'm from a place that always allows it. So, okay, let's see here. There's 2 things I want to go, 2 more clips, and then I need, like I said, I'm only halfway through this, so I've got a lot more to go, and I need to really process my thoughts on this stuff, but there was a couple clips here that I want to show, and then I'm going to get out of here. Give my eyes a break. If any of you know like a solution to eye strain from screens,
and specific conscious experiences.
Scientific
theories.
You know what's interesting is we see blue light from all these screens, and that's why at night you turn it to red. And red shifting is when something is moving away from you, and blue shifting is when something's coming at you. And it's literally like the light, it's like the tech is coming at us all day long, and then at night you switch it to red shifting, basically, and it's it's then moving away from you, and you can kind of just let it go sometimes and go to sleep. But it's hard to the reason why it's hard to go to sleep, I think, with the blue light, which is why they have the night shift on your phone, is because it's literally, the tech is like, it's coming at you. Imagine trying to sleep while someone is coming towards you. You can't. You're just looking at them coming towards you, and just like they're getting closer and closer and closer. I think this is doing this to your mind, kind of. But kind of. But it's, if somebody's walking away from you, it's much easier to fall asleep.
That can explain that correlation. There are for any specific. There's not a scientific theory that can explain even one specific conscious experience, like the taste of chocolate or the smell of garlic, that says, for example, this pattern of brain activity or this functional aspect of brain activity must be the taste of chocolate. It couldn't be the smell of a rose, and these are the precise reasons why. There's just nothing on the table, and so I'm trying to solve two problems. I'm trying to say the reason why space-time is not fundamental is because something else is, consciousness. And if I start with consciousness, I can perhaps get a theory that explains this correlation between conscious experiences and brain states, but I don't start with something in space-time, namely brain states. I don't start with brain states and figure out how they cause consciousness. I go the other way around. I start with consciousness and show how it creates space-time as a data structure and brains and neurons as particular objects within that data structure. So the idea, the big picture idea is, if space-time isn't fundamental, as the physicists are now recognizing, then objects in space-time are not.
And just so people are clear, this is not new that space-time isn't fundamental. It's not like a kooky theory. This has been going around since the 80s. Just so that they don't think you're glomming onto some fad.
That's right, and yeah, I think, as you said, most physicists now, most first-rank theoretical physicists, just recognize that it's sort of just, of course, space-time isn't fundamental, and of course, our job is to try to figure out what's the next step.
And it's not such a crazy idea either.
Right.
When you were speaking with Michael Shermer, he was just blown away. There's no way that space-time can't be fundamental. There's a cup in front of me. I see the cup. That's beside the point. There's been many times where we have an effective theory, and then we find one that's more fundamental that produces that. There's no reason to think that our current theories aren't effective.
Right, and my colleagues in the cognitive neurosciences can be forgiven if they don't understand the state of the play in physics, right? I mean, they were taught some physics in their backgrounds, and they have just absorbed the idea that space-time is fundamental, and that's perfectly fine in a Newtonian universe, and even in special relativity. And in general relativity, is when you put Einstein's theory of gravity together with quantum theory that you get the problem, and that's sort of beyond what you could expect a normal cognitive neuroscientist to really have studied. And so I don't blame my colleagues there for not understanding this, but for any real professional physicist, it's just obvious. General relativity, quantum field theory don't play well.
I see there's two problems. One, if you encounter the general public, and when I say general public, I mean the rationally minded skeptics like Michael Shermer or maybe even Sam Harris, and their sticking point might be the space-time fundamental aspect.
Right.
But then when you speak to a physicist, their sticking point would be consciousness. You're saying consciousness is fundamental. Like, I agree with you, space-time is emergent, but then consciousness is complicated. That's an emergent phenomenon for a neuroscientist to figure out, or some people like Penrose. There's a quantum mechanical aspect to it, but it's still somewhat complicated.
So this is the Babylon problem. It's that our fields are divided in their language. So people are learning quantum mechanics, and then others are learning neuroscience. And I was speaking with a long time ago. I mean, not that long ago. I was speaking with the geneticist. This was on Clubhouse, and an AI researcher who's a neuroscientist who works for DeepMind, and they were quite rude, but for one, but I mean that's fine. I understand that, but it was more to do. It ended up being more to do with my previous employer than which speaking of, I'm gonna show you something before I leave, but and then it had to do with it. Actually, what I was saying, but at the end, the neuroscientist was saying to me, Tyler, you can't. There's conscious AI. There's super intelligence. There's general intelligence, which is human level intelligence, and these are all different things, and also they're going to take a lot of people a long time and a lot of work to do, and you know you have no idea what you're talking about. And she had no idea about the work that was being done by Eric Weinstein or Stephen Wolfram or Bernardo Kastrup. Obviously she didn't know about my work, if she didn't know about their work. And I said to her, I was like, first of all, like, you don't have to make a conscious AI, a general intelligence, and a super intelligence are all the same thing, first of all. Second of all, you're not going to have to make it. It's just going to emerge, and when the conditions are correct, and those conditions are based on are most closely defined using structures related to this work, not the neural nets that she's making. And there's just such a division of language and a division of study, when in reality every single field is starting to study consciousness, and every single institution is starting to just deal in whatever consciousnesses want to hear. Like I was watching, even the Air Force now, their social media is just all about prickly little things that you put in your arm, and then you squeeze something into your arm that if I say on here, I might get throttled. So, new genetic therapies that have been quite the point of contention in the world. The Air Force is like focusing on that on all their social media, but that's not alone. Like everything is becoming just the news, and we're converging to just a singularity of narrative, which is not good if that narrative is destructive, and it will be for a time. So highly suggest just insulating yourself a little bit for now. Keep an eye on it, but insulate yourself a bit. Okay, last clip I wanted to show. This is where Sentient Singularity Theory kind of comes into play a little bit more, and I'll explain.
So the nice thing about that answer is I don't need to guess or know what objective reality is. To know that evolution by natural selection entails that whatever the reality is, we don't see it, we don't perceive it. Okay, so that the first objection is a very natural objection, by the way. How could you know that we don't see reality? Because you don't know what reality is. Well, the answer is the mathematics is so sophisticated, it's allowing you to say that whatever reality is, you don't see it, without ever claiming to know what reality is. The second point then is that, often people will say, well, so you've just said that none of our perceptions, none of our cognitive capacities are about the truth. And then you try to come up with a model of objective reality, right? This theory of conscious agents and so forth. Well, and indeed I am. And that's because I don't take evolution by natural selection as the final word. It's just a tool. That tool entails a pragmatic view. Great, that's what that tool entails. I would like to get a deeper view in which consciousness is fundamental. And from that deeper view, show how space-time emerges as an interface representation of this deeper reality, and show within that interface why the dynamics of this deeper realm looks, at least in certain cases, like evolution by natural selection, and why it looks like the kind of structure that we see in evolutionary theory. So evolution by natural selection will be a constraint on any deeper theory of reality that I propose. Any deeper theory, when it projects into space-time, it better look like general relativity, quantum field theory, evolution by natural selection, when you project it into space-time, or improvements on those theories, but not less than those theories. It has to explain everything those theories explain and more within space-time. And this is maybe subtle for those who aren't scientists, but this is just standard. I mean, what I'm saying here is just the standard view of scientists.
Brilliant. So he's right. I agree with everything he just said. I will say this, I will add to it and say, evolution by natural selection, even combined with ascension, which is part of my model, or up-leveling, stacking as I call it, which is it's replication and stacking is the two mechanisms that on a biological level, it's multiplication and addition in math, but it's on a biological level, it's you could call it ascension or stacking and multiplication, or multiplying and replicating, you could call it. So, and then there's adaptation within all of that replication, and then there's ascension within the stacking of that information, or the entangling of that information into a unified bundle. But so getting from multiple cells to an organism, that step is ascension or stacking, and it is part of this. It's not, and there is no Darwinian explanation that is just adaptation. It's not just adaptation. It's something else. There's a choice aspect to it, and there's a mutual. There's an interaction happening between an exterior consciousness and an interior consciousness happening that is not visible, and the way that it would be, the interactions are visible within the waves of periodicity, like they are when you're looking at organism interactions that lead to adaptations, and natural selection and sexual selection and things like that. But what he said though here was that evolution would not select for the ability to perceive, to see the world because the math is too complicated. First of all, I reject that. I think the math is actually far less complicated than. I think the math gets simpler the deeper you get to reality, because you need to get to a point that precedes what we currently call mathematics, that gives rise to mathematics, just like it gives rise to biological, the biological science and all the theories contained therein, and chemical science and all the theories contained within, and quantum physics and all the theories and aspects of that contained within. Same thing with math. Mathematics is not fundamental. It just is it just seems that way in space-time. But there is a structure that mathematics takes place in, and those mathematical patterns are just the abstraction of the material patterns, but it's the same patterns and they occur in a specific structure, and that structure is the structure of mind, and it is a pre-calculative theory almost, which means the math is not that complicated, but the models, the symmetry models, are I don't want to say complicated, but they're difficult to perceive or to deduce. But the thing is that even if you can't see, even if evolution doesn't let us see reality around us, like objective reality, because we can't process it, we do have to. I mean, in a way, it is. I mean, the fact, look at your arm. You have an arm, you have a hand, you have fingers, okay? And then you have your legs, and you have your feet, and you have your toes. This is the segmentation of information into the structure that is the binary triality structure that I call it, but it is the prioritization and categorization, or prioritization and differentiation structure that and generation structure that is the structure that the mind organizes information into. And that's why you perceive this triality to your limbs. It's a binary triality. You have legs and you have arms. And then within each of those, you have a periodicity of increasing detail or force, which is, finger, hand, arm, toe, foot, leg. This is like up, charm, truth, down, strange, beauty, the quirks. It's the same pattern. So we are actually perceiving reality. Kind of. It's just information is being divided into what it must be divided in, because reality is consciousness, which is that structure that, categorizes and organizes information and interprets information. Like, that's what it does. So I don't really know if we are perceiving reality. Space-time is not fundamental, but it is but all the structures that we see around us, there is a super literal structure that occurs everywhere, and that structure, that pattern, that is reality. And you just have to realize that it's occurring here and here and here and here and here and here and here. But if you're only looking at space-time, or you're only looking at quantum mechanics and the fundamental particles, or the elementary particles, or the fundamental forces, then you're going to miss the pattern, because you need to look at all of these things. And to bring it back to why I really think that sentience is the right word, is that even if our sight and our by the way, this organizes into a binary triality too. You have sight, you have smell, and you have hearing, which is to perceive things that you perceive as separate from you. And then you have your sense of touch, and you have your sense of taste, and you have your sense of emotion. And all of these are when things touch you. They have to touch you. You have to touch your tongue to something to taste it. You have to touch something with your hand to feel it. And then when something moves you emotionally, it literally moves you. It super literally moves you, and it super literally touches you on the quantum entanglement level. And that is feeling. The highest sense, the sixth sense, you have a sixth sense. That sixth sense is feeling. It's emotion. And people call it intuition, but it's just emotion. Same thing. And intuition is just when you perceive emotions moving you that don't have an immediately perceivable cause. So you're like, I'm going to choose that one. Why? I don't know. I just got a good feeling about it. Okay? So you've got a good feeling about it. So you're feeling something. But it is literally your sixth sense, and you can be moved by the maneuvering of other sentient beings in the entanglement substructure, and God manipulating things in the entanglement substructure, other beings in the entanglement substructure. And you can also be moved by the totality of the information processing coming from your other five senses. And I mean, and they are also an increasing of detail and mass or force. I mean, think about this. So would you rather look at something disgusting, smell something disgusting, or hear something disgusting? Probably want to hear something disgusting, then see something disgusting, then smell something disgusting, because the level of smelling something disgusting could literally make you have a physical reaction, and much more intense than seeing something disgusting, which is much more intense than hearing something disgusting. But same thing goes with perceiving things that are, you know, not separate from you, but one with you, which is when something is touching you, and it is, or when something is inside you essentially versus outside you. So basically, it's like, what is more impactful to your mind? Tasting something bad, feeling something painful, tasting something gross, feeling something painful, or emotionally, like, feeling distress. Emotionally feeling distress is the worst. It is the most impactful one, and there is no arguing that. If people argue, well, what's worse, physical pain or emotional? Physical pain leads to emotional pain. Emotional pain doesn't. It does lead to physical pain too, but physical pain doesn't necessarily lead to emotional pain. Emotional pain can lead to physical pain much more readily than physical pain would lead to emotional pain. As much as that sounds counterintuitive to some people, and it sounds probably like it makes perfect sense to others. Feeling is the key, and that's why I don't think conscious agent is specific enough, but it's the closest anyone else has gotten. But feeling is the key. It's the moment where things that you have processed, the information you have processed, is oriented around yourself and processed in how it relates to you. And you are the truest thing that you know. Therefore, you are the fundamental. Therefore, feeling is fundamental. Sentience is fundamental to general consciousness, to any other aspect of consciousness. It has to be. So, but other than that, I'm going to continue listening to this because this is fascinating. He's the closest person that I've ever found to my theory. It's awesome. I don't view this as competition. I really don't. I think this is great. At first, when I first started this work, and I would see somebody who was even like Eric Weinstein, who was like, I could tell was close, but nobody else could even tell that geometric unity is aligned with my work. And but I could tell, and it made me like feel this competitive angst of like, oh my gosh, like what is this meaningless for me to know all this or to be working on this because he's got it and he's got like a 30-year head start. But no, that's not the way that it is. We have to go from, string theory to geometric unity, from geometric unity to to constructor theory, to conscious agent theory, to sentient singularity theory. You can't just jump from like string theory to sentient singularity theory. And every single one of these has subjective value and objective value. So it's, sentient singularity theory isn't as focused on how do we do some of the things that geometric unity is going to focus on, probably relating to warp. Even though it It does come up in Sentient Singularity Theory, but it's not the associating of it with space time. The more you bring something down into the material world, the more intense the math is going to get, and the more fluent you have to be in the subjective languages of the various fields. So this is not a it's not a competition. Everybody wins if we get to the truth. Unfortunately, we're going to get to the truth, and then society will misinterpret it to mean that there's, no such thing as morality. I think. Eye exercises are a must for me. There are apps I have to keep my vision sharp for herps and whatever. I don't use the eye exercise app anymore since I learned techniques from them already. What happens if everyone who partook in it is gone within the next 3 to 20 years? I don't know what partook in what. I've only newly contacted tribes in the middle of the Amazon see nothing when they look at a movie playing on a stream. Yeah, they probably see nothing. They can't emotionally process it. By the way, hit the like button if you have found this valuable. Subscribe, share it. Join the Discord tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I will be having the open call in our Discord. I look forward to that every week. It's always a great conversation. We talk about everything. You can, as long as you're respectful, you can bring up any topic that you wish, and we talk for hours and hours and hours. It's always a really good group. Message me privately on Instagram if you'd like the invitation to the Discord, and if you'd like to participate in that conversation. We have been growing a really good community. It's growing a lot recently, and I think that it seems to be a really good group. I really am happy about that. So I try not to just put the link everywhere. I try and let people ask me for it. People that ask for something are more invested than people that just take something when it's been handed to them. Partook in an experiment. I still wonder what you would think if you read The Universal One by Walter Russell. I'd probably agree with him, but I would probably also disagree in some things, but agree in most. His models look a lot like mine, but I will buy it, and then eventually I'll read it. I did just organize all my books this weekend. Very happy about it. But kind of a cool thing I wanted to look at, this is the last thing. When I was at PragerU, I had an idea that I pushed for over a year. And well over a year. Probably almost 2 years. And it was called, it was for a show called Trading Up with Will Witt. And it was like going to be Will Witt goes to trade schools, and each episode, and he learns, a new skill. It was kind of going to be like Dirty Jobs. And it was going to show people that you can go to a trade school, you can learn to trade. It's way more fun than going to university. It's way more useful, practical, and also marketable, monetizable. But today I was like talking to friends of mine who we all worked at PragerU together. Most of us do not anymore, but at some point we all did. And I was like, I still, I'm holding out for one day they, launch Trading Up. They did today. What are the odds? Literally the day that I talk about it, they launch it like an hour and a half later, probably 100%. But it wasn't a multi-episode show, but it was. I haven't watched it yet, but I will watch it. This is valuable content, or at least it's a valuable topic. I haven't seen the content yet, but I do commend them for this, that they actually did it. And they used the name. I'm stoked about it. Like, I wrote up the whole show and it had the name, and like I kept, trying to push for this to happen. This is it. Literally. Over a year later.
We talk.
Oh my
obviously.
gosh. I said it was supposed to be like Dirty Jobs, and they got the guy Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs in the show. I mean, it's not a show. They made it into a mini doc. It would have been much more useful as a show, but it's okay. They did something with it. At least it's not just nonsense political content like everybody has been pushing lately, which is just not helpful. It's just toxic. But this is cool. They actually got Mike Rowe. I like Mike Rowe a lot. I've met him a couple times. That's pretty badass. It's pretty badass. Still making waves. Even though I'm gone. I gave it to them, and right before I left, I was like, I hope one day you guys use this. And they did. The odds that they launched it today, the day that I'm talking to everybody about it in like our little chat, is definitely just 100%. That's so funny. I'm gonna have to watch this. I think trade schools are and apprenticeships are the future. But I'm gonna go, and I appreciate everybody tuning in. I'm going to listen to the rest of Donald Hoffman's Conscious Agent theory interview, and I'm also going to listen to his interview with Michael Shermer. As much as I very much disagree with Michael Shermer, I do enjoy his interviews. For one, because it's a little entertaining. Just because it's interesting to see the blind spots of skepticism as an ideology, but also because he seems to be a genuinely like nice guy, and and he treats people with respect from what I've seen for the most part, which is commendable. But like I said, tomorrow Discord discussion at 7 p.m. Message me if you would like to join, and hit the like button, subscribe, share it, and join the Patreon if you'd like to contribute to this work monetarily. Join our Discord community if you'd like to contribute personally. And I'm trying to grow a community, not just a followers. The followers and likes on YouTube is not the goal. We have big plans, and most of them are kept more for the Discord discussions, but eventually they will all be discussed. So anyways, thanks guys, and peace. Sorry for the technical glitches.